Welcome to the show, Jake. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Good to see you as always.
Let's just get right into it. How do you use metaphors to define your priorities, and how does that shape those priorities?
The way that I structure my priorities, I feel like my beliefs that I have are ultimately what I use to uphold my priorities, to make sure that I'm going in the right track, to make sure that I'm upholding what I find is most useful for me or what's most beneficial to myself or those around me. So I like to think of the metaphor uh, that my beliefs are like pillars. So I have pillars of belief that are meant to withstand the test of time. Whatever opposition might threaten those beliefs or throw me off of whatever direction I have set for myself. So my priority is to structure my beliefs in a way that is so firm, that is so intertwined with what I want to do, what I want to bring, who I want to be, so that if my beliefs are strong enough, if what I see for myself or what I see for my future doesn't align with these beliefs, then it'll fall outside of my priorities. So in a way, it's like the beliefs are what blankets all the priorities I have. And for a priority not to fall in line with my beliefs would pull me away from my mission, what I want to do, and who I want to be. So what I find that so many people have struggling to prioritize certain things in their life is they don't have any emotional attachment. They don't have the introspection and the thought needed to give substance to what they want to do. So they don't have the intensity, the passion, the that focus on what they want because it's not anything that is anything except a priority. So say if you have a priority to take better care of your finances or just apply to as many jobs as possible, just hypothetically, or you want to take as best care of your family as you can. You want to step up in a role in your house or whatever the case. These are just a list of priorities you've set for yourself, but they would fall under one of your pillars of, or I'm sorry, in this case, it would be held up by your pillar of belief. So if you have intertwined yourself with a belief that will cover three of these things, it's like if you give yourself a belief that you want to be the absolute best that you can at taking care of your loved ones or putting yourself in a position to do a lot for as many people as possible, or even just seeing your skills blossom to the level that you want them to be at, then all of those things could fit under one pillar or multiple pillars. But it's the intensity of your belief, the way that you've identified with it that will make holding those priorities um that will make taking those priorities to a point where you can execute without hesitation, where you can execute almost habitually, um, because you're so passionate about it. You have such a belief that has been intertwined with who you want to be, who you want to see yourself as. Something if you guys don't feel this, or if you don't feel this by the end of it, then I've made a mistake. But belief is one of the things that I really want to hammer home as something that you can utilize in so many ways that not on any woo woo spiritual way, but just internally, the way that adding belief to your life can change the trajectory of your life, can change the way that you interact with people, your relationships, your goals, and really enhance the way that you go about executing what you want to do in life. So I do feel as though my biggest priorities are making sure that I'm paying attention to those beliefs and seeing how, as opportunities come up, as new obstacles arise, in what ways can I overcome and approach these obstacles in a way that coincides and aligns with my beliefs. And it's a way that not only holds you accountable to what you want to get done, but also guarantees that your decision making has an additional level of I get bulletproofing is not the right term, but I guess it would make it so you're more confident in your decisions and you can make decisions at a quicker rate than somebody who doesn't have, I guess, that underlying understanding of what they want to do and what they want to bring to the table. So, for a lot of ways, for a lot of reasons, it's it's something I find that's like a really an indispensable tool to really, get to know yourself, get to know what you want to do. Not just getting to know yourself in the sense of who you are now, but who do you want to be. Something recently through psychology and neuroscience is realizing that in a lot of ways, the people that we have become, the people that we have been molded into by life and experience and memories, isn't a set in stone person. It isn't a set in stone belief. And even with these pillars of belief, the ultimate goal is to have something that can withstand the test of time, withstand any opposition, any people who might want to naysay, any people that think it's nonsense, any internal dialogue that might distract you from what you want to accomplish. Um, but what this does is, as you're able to see the person you can become, these pillars are the thing that not only helps you stay in line with the person you want to be, maybe maintain the aspects of yourself that you want to maintain, but also, as I said, there's different obstacles, there's different phases of life, there's different um, understandings that you get as you grow, and as well, I do feel like these pillars are meant to be maintained for a long period of time, incorporating an understanding that things in life change, that your priorities might change, and being able to adjust as you see fit, but keeping the foundation of this pillared structure that you're creating, being able to stay in close proximity with who you want to be, who you want to become, and then also realizing in what ways you can improve upon yourself constantly. So those beliefs are also subject to the almost improvisational improvements you want to bring to your life. But the foundation of the structure should always remain. These are the things that will bring you your health, your happiness, your wealth, your relationship, and the integrity of your relationships, the strength of your relationships can be all influenced through your belief in the way that you approach each one of these facets of life. So it's one of my, I guess one of the best things that I've done in my recent years in life that has not only changed the way that I look at things, the way that I feel about things, but also the way that I'm able to engage these different these different aspects of life and execute in a way that gives me a lot more efficiency and just staying on the right track with myself. And I believe a lot of what brings people a lot of discomfort, a lot of indecisiveness, a lot of I guess anxiety is that I know all too many people, and I've heard all too many stories about people not quite being on the same page with themselves. Like in one aspect, they want one thing for themselves, and in another aspect, they see another, or they're put in a situation where they're at a crossroads, and their brain might say this is the best, and emotionally they're feeling the other route is the best. But if you can align these things in a way that both logically and emotionally find themselves meeting on the same page, you can eliminate a lot of indecisiveness, a lot of anxiety, a lot of the negative side effects that come with being put in a vulnerable position between options. Um, so you can, in a way, use these beliefs and use the introspection that comes with finding these beliefs for yourself to further align yourself, further align the two parts of us that are always kind of battling, um, to again make you a more efficient decision maker and executor of your goals. So that's one of my favorites right there.
Yeah, yeah. I think You said a lot of interesting things there, and I want to pick out a couple of them. When you describe these beliefs as pillars, kind of holding up the rest of the house or the rest of your life, you describe them as, needing to stand the test of time. And I'm curious how you integrate new information and new beliefs and, just the general evolution and change that we experience as people over time, and personally and with our relationships and with our goals, into your foundation, into your pillars.
What I do find myself doing, I do try to really take the necessary time and thought needed before, I guess, shaking up the foundation of these pillars, because that's what's required when you are renovating. You have to break a bit down and then build it back up the way that you want it. So that would, as you said, indicate as you go through life, you might find something that's useful, something that might have tweaked your perspective on the way you think things should be done, or so on and so forth. And I guess one of the ways that I go about this is almost, I do take more from my logical side than my emotional side in this particular choice of renovation of the pillars, only because it's a bit easier to verify. But again, I want the two to be on the same page, the logical and the emotional. So from the logical standpoint, I take almost a Socratic method to it. So I do like to break it down. If it is something that is useful, something that has been proven to add an additional edge in life, not a shortcut, but an edge, something that I find genuinely useful, either through building relationships, building a stronger, fortified mind, a more peaceful state of mind, which for me personally makes me a bit more efficient, or so on and so forth. The usefulness of something, the effect that it has on myself and others, and the likelihood of it being true or false. So that third one is the hardest one to approach. But in the things that I incorporate into my life, I try diligently to make the most of things that I've learned the most through experience. So these are things that I've brought into my life, first through observation, then through experimentation, then through better understanding. And then through those three things and testing them out in your life, you don't want to just jump head first into something entirely in its entirety. It's through observation and experience and the introspection of it all, because this is something that might be outside of yourself, but once you make it a part of your life, it is now a part of you in a sense. So you want to really see in what ways this conflicts with parts of yourself, in ways that it interacts with the other parts of you and the people around you. And this isn't also to say that everything should be based on how it affects others, but I mean solely in a helping versus hurtful sense. And this ties into my beliefs, like the way that I go about integrating these things. I also have a pillar of belief for holding up how I believe I should integrate things. And so the integration that I use, knowing what I want to bring out of my life, is a lot more dependent on the benefits that it can bring, not focally to myself, but predominantly to those around me. And again, this isn't this isn't influenced solely by other people, but for other people. So while many may not agree or like what it is, if it is something that is genuinely for the greater good, something that doesn't hurt anyone, something that does not bring negative side effects to my life or others, and has tangible use, tangible experience that can be used to make my life more efficient, and in turn the lives of others um, more satisfied, more happy, more engaged, whatever the case. One of my pillars is very much so doing as much as I can in my life to be able to give back and share with others, either the fruits of my labor or the experience that I've gained as a result of the pursuit.
So one of the criteria for your integration process you mentioned is it being true or it being false. I'm curious about your take on self-serving beliefs that may not be true that people use. And I'll give an example, right? In a very real sense, in a literal sense, the Earth could be hit by a comet or an asteroid at any time, and we could all be dead at literally any moment without warning, right? And the point isn't to get existential, but like you can think of that as a reality, and it can cause you anxiety. It's a true fact about the world that is not self-serving, right? It's going to distract from your attention, your ability to accomplish things. The opposite of that would be, there's no chance of that happening, and you don't think about it. Or maybe a better example of a self-serving false thing would be, I don't know. Maybe like I'm going to be the best employee at my job or something like that. And it motivates you to work harder. You may never be the most effective employee at your job, in your workspace, but while you're there, that belief motivates you to work harder or to accomplish more, and it gives you more satisfaction. So I'm curious what your take on the necessity of truth in those beliefs, like where that line is, and if they're self-serving, is it worth pushing that line?
Right. So I guess the approach that I'd like to take is that there is also a healthy amount of delusion that might be necessary in certain instances. But you have to, like, for example, taking your example of the comet potentially hitting the Earth, that is a verifiable fact that could very well happen at any point in time, like you said. But in what ways does having or not having that belief, or perhaps the way you framed your thoughts around that belief, dictate your actions today? This is something abstract, could happen, couldn't happen tomorrow, even if its probability is very high. Are you the type of person who will take that belief and say, there's no point to anything if I could just vanish in the blink of an eye? Or are you the person that says that every moment is now 100 times more valuable, now knowing that life could vanish at an instant? And then the opposite of that being that if you were to just say, forget all the statistics, it's not going to happen, which is, again, a delusion. I would say this is not self-serving. This is not rooted in fact, and there's no difference to simply reframing your mind in the factual sense. You can take a fact that many people might not like and reframe the way you look at it. So I don't say that you should go out there believing whatever falsehoods, whatever, I don't think that the asteroid, for example, is something that should dissuade you from seeing the truth. But there are instances where, like you said with the job example, that there is a tangible benefit to seeing yourself as a future best employee. There is a mind over matter element that gives you more leverage, more of an upper hand in utilizing your talents, your abilities, by subconsciously believing that you already are that person. That brings a level of confidence, a level of, willingness to utilize the best of your abilities to be that which you think you are. So it's really, again, you don't, when I say there is a healthy amount of delusion, it's very there's incredible amount of thought that's required behind the forming of a lot of these beliefs, and you should really sit down and be true with yourself, be real with yourself, whether blankly denying reality will give you any sure benefit as opposed to reframing your mind to the truth. So it is definitely selective. And there's going to be, for the average person, a bit of a, we're all average. We all do operate along a lot of the same channels and pathways in life. But what I'm saying is that that will take a lot of thought for an individual to go through these things. But that is the payoff. That is the ultimate goal, is to become okay with diving into who you are and who you want to become. That is the thing that will bear fruit at the end of this. That is just another one of the ways that you can teach your brain to work for you and not against you. Because like I said, you can find out that an asteroid is going to hit and you can waste the rest of your days stressing and panicking. Or you can decide that this is the day that you're going to make that jump for the promotion, or you're going to go back to school, or you're going to ditch everything and put your life on the line and just chase those dreams. It's a million different things. One singular thing can be a million different things to a million different people. And so you want to be very sure that what you decide something is ultimately something that will benefit not only your life, but your mind, your day to day. And you owe it to yourself to try your best to know what is true and false, and then make the decision whether it's worth going forward with the frame of mind that you think will be most helpful to you. So that's at least the way that I think personally has helped me a lot to decide what is worth deciding for myself and what is worth just believing as is, because there's a lot of things that will hurt you if you decide that it is not a fact, and a lot of things that will hurt you if you decide it is a fact but you have the wrong frame of mind around it. So
absolutely. I really like the emphasis you put on, it's almost like putting in capitals, bold letters, like taking the time to think about the things, taking the time to think about who you are, who you want to be, the things you want, the things you care about. The little things become so much easier to deal with and work through when you have, as you describe, your pillars or your foundation or whatever metaphor we want to use. When you have that picked out ahead of time, something that's helpful for me in that realm, as far as an exercise that I do, is sometimes I'll focus on something that I want. And let's say I want a Porsche, right? I'll just pick a random thing. I'm not even a car person, but for the sake of the example, I want a Porsche. And then I'll think about, why do I want a Porsche? Well, I want a Porsche because I want to drive a Porsche. And more importantly, I want to be seen driving a Porsche. I want to be seen getting out and getting into a Porsche. Well, why do I want to be seen getting out of a Porsche? Well, because I want the appreciation or accolades that come along with having a nice car. Or, when I go to my reunion, I want people to see me in a Porsche, you know what I mean? And then you can kind of look at the obvious things, which is a thing like, oh, I have a desire for this, and work backwards, level by level, to find, why do I actually want that? And pinpoint those reasons and decide, are those reasons that I as a person truly want to identify with, or are they ancillary to, what you call your core beliefs or your pillars of belief, things that I really want to accomplish? In this example, it's like, no, I don't care about getting out of getting out of a Porsche. I'd rather spend that money on cameras for the podcast or microphones for the studio or something like that. And it makes all of those urges and inclinations and little decisions throughout life or pressures from peers or coworkers or parents so much easier to handle, because like I know that I do want this and I know that I don't want that. And the trap or the the hubris that you walk around thinking that all of your decisions are your own is a dangerous one, because there's everyone has pressures from somewhere, and those influence our decisions. And if you don't take the time to slow down and think about these things, you'll end up with a Porsche that you don't really want, or a house in a neighborhood you don't want to live in, or a job for 10 years that you don't really care about in a field that you're not passionate about. As we were diving into our priorities, it made me interested in how you find your motivation for those things, because as you develop your core beliefs, there will be things that you're kind of forced to do. You know what I mean? Say your goal is to have a very successful bakery. Well, maybe it takes 10 years to save up the money to get there. So you're working some other job that you don't care about. How do you think people should go about framing that for motivation to do that thing that isn't the direct path, but is still the path?
And I do feel like it took me pretty long to come around to this conclusion, admittedly. But motivation is always felt like a bit of a game that we play with ourselves. Like some days you're motivated, some days you're not. You're trying to anticipate what causes the motivation. Why am I not today? It can be very uncertain. And there's going to be days that you're going to have to do what you want to do without the motivation that you think is necessary to get it done. Which ultimately led me to, I guess, realizing that instead of playing this game of cat and mouse with this elusive motivation that we're all looking for, and don't get me wrong, motivation is, in a sense, a very real thing, but I don't know that we're utilizing it to the best of our efforts, making things as, again, efficient as possible to get things done the way that we want them to, or to get the things done that we want to get done. And if we find ourselves relying on motivation to such an extent, then it becomes much harder to accomplish those things. There are ways that you can garner motivation much more consistently, but instead of, again, playing this pursuit with yourself, I found that personally I like to rely a bit more on discipline over motivation, because discipline is something that can be fortified by those pillars of belief that we talked about earlier. But discipline is something that, once cultivated, can be unwavering in spite of the obstacles. You have your ability to be able to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations. The ability, and that's why I do believe, in a lot of ways, doing harder things in life makes the smaller things much more palatable, almost to the extent that if you, like we were talking about earlier, are trying to cultivate a peaceful, well-fortified, a strong mind, that if you were to, let's say, just sit around for 2 years, maybe you're making money, so you don't really have any need, you don't have to exert yourself very much. Washing the dishes will feel like the biggest pain. Or if you don't really have much to do, it's like the simplest of things become tiresome and exhausting, or you've lowered your tolerance to doing difficult things. And as a result, it makes not very significantly taxing things feel much larger than they are. That's just an example. I'm not saying, a lot of us do. So it's very much like a muscle that you train. The discipline is exercised, and strength is built from that, not only by practicing discipline, but there is a strength of your discipline that comes through that practice. So in if we were to compare the two, you find that motivation is something that you are in pursuit of, something that you crave and wish so that your task can be completed. Whereas discipline is something that you can witness getting more and more defined and fortified as you practice it. So that when you are confronted with something that you may not want to do, it is not a matter of, do I have the motivation to do this? Is my energy the way I want it to be today? It's not as much of this questionnaire you got to give yourself to determine how good of a quality day you're going to have. It's like, if your discipline involves things that make your mind as clear and concise as possible, if you incorporate practices that will give you an additional edge, or orating or writing or whatever your skill may be, um, on top of these disciplines, you're stacking skills. You're stacking skills that make it so these obstacles that you have to overcome are based upon, again, your discipline. Your discipline will give you the clarity, the skill, the ability that you're looking for to get it done without motivation being even a thought. It'll be a habituated practice. You become a they always say humans are creatures of habit. We're using our habit to the best of our ability to make things. Essentially, we're minimizing the obstacle of the obstacle. We're minimizing how much of a drain, how much of a drag, how much we might not be able to accomplish, and instead focusing on the bare bones, what is necessary and what we need to bring to the table in order for that to get done. And through cultivating that discipline, you get that much closer to being in a state of preparedness whenever that time might arise. So I feel like motivation is something that came about solely because so many people were confronted with lives where they find it absolutely necessary to do things that they absolutely hate doing or don't want to do in order to live just this semblance of the life that they want to live. And so I feel like that motivation mindset was something that was a necessity for people who are acclimating to this style of life. And as we find ourselves getting deeper and deeper into that style of life through the economic stressors or all the different changes that have come about in recent years, we find ourselves, I guess, this is almost like a change of philosophy for the way that we can go about getting things done to see a life that we want to live. Um, I guess just again, like we were talking about earlier, just do you want to have a disdain for the fact, or do you want to reframe your mind towards that fact?
Definitely. I I really love the way that you described the relative nature of the tasks we complete. You know, if you're living an easy life, then doing the dishes is going to seem like such a pain in the ass because you could just be living your easy life. You know, it's why I personally advocate for trying to live a hard life, trying to do difficult things on a regular basis. Um, and I'm reading this book right now called The Status Game, which I mentioned to you before. But it kind of breaks down from a psychological perspective how we view everything in relation to other things. There is no real objective way to view something. And, you know, in the context of this book, it talks a lot about status, obviously, and people's interpersonal and intersocial relationships. But it explains a lot of behavior, you know, in the way that, you know, famous people or wealthy people can act, you know, very petty, or, you know, they can act low status even though they have achieved great things. And it's because it's all relative to your surroundings. So yeah, they're high status compared to a poor kid in another country or a poor American in this country, but their surroundings, are other high status individuals, other wealthy individuals, other, intellectual elites or whatever it may be. So in that local area, in this space, it's a social space, their relative status is not super high, right? And in the same way, when you're living an easy life, your relative hardship is is so drastically increased when you have to take out the garbage, or when you have to do the dishes, or when you're thinking about pursuing a passion and then you realize, oh, like I have to like put in the effort to record a video or write a song or something like that. Because normally you just put in the bare minimum and then continue on, consuming media or whatever it may be. But I think that's a really great point, and I haven't thought of, the daily chores or the things that you have to do but don't want to do in that light before. I have this quote from, I believe his name is Stephen Pressfield, from a book called The War of Art, which I've also mentioned to you, and I've mentioned on the podcast before. Fantastic book. The athlete knows the day will never come when he wakes up pain-free. He has to play hurt. And it just kind of consolidates the notion that there's not going to be the perfect time. There's not going to be the day where or the time period in your life where you're just always motivated to go out and pursue your passion, or go out and, find the perfect girl, or go out and get the perfect job, or whatever it is. You have to play hurt. You have to play when you don't want to play. You have to do the things when it feels like the world is against you, whether it is or not, whether you're able to shape your mindset that particular day around the facts in a way that's for you or against you. You just have to do it, because in the long run, when you do it, you're going to come out happier. You're going to come out more fulfilled, because you'll be able to look back and be like, in spite of the challenges, in spite of the setbacks, in spite of the obstacles in my way, I accomplished these things. Looking at it as like everything lined up perfectly and I took advantage, that's not much of a story. You're not going to, one, it's not going to happen, but two, even if it did happen, like, you won't feel the same sense of satisfaction in the same way that, trust fund kids, they don't feel satisfaction from getting their parents' money.
Yeah.
Right. They don't.
Adds more problems.
Exactly. Because, it's like I said, it's all relative. They were given that. They seek to pursue their own accomplishments, hopefully. But it's, I've said this many times on the show already, but like, it's the better story.
No doubt. It would be almost impossible for me to, at least the way I see it, the way I see my future, the way that I feel it intertwines with all the beliefs, I've made it so that the most enjoyable part is the pursuit, the daily overcoming of the obstacles, of getting things accomplished in spite of the aches and pains, both physical and mental, or emotional, or the growing pains even. In spite of all these things, like you said, that makes the flavor of the success you're looking for, whether that be a state of mind or a tangible success, just makes it that much more enjoyable. And I already know, because we did speak about this briefly before, but that is I guess to intertwine earlier into some of the priorities and beliefs, is that we've heard it a million times, but I don't know how many of us internalize it, that the journey is what gives the final destination the most meaning. Like, the journey you take, what you put in to get where you want to go, is ultimately what gives you the satisfaction that you're looking for. Because like we're in talking about the trust fund kids, everybody says they just want to hit the lottery. Everyone just says that they just want $1 million cash tomorrow night. Like, you know what I mean? But that can solve a lot of immediate problems. But did you grow at all? Did you Was there any transactional growth that took place that required you to become a better person, that required you to evolve in any sort? Was there anything that transpired? You know what I mean? Um, so I am interested in like what your takeaways from that quote or from that book are. I know you have very similar or even identical maybe beliefs to that, but just if you did want to expound on that.
Yeah, I think I'll I'll touch on the specifically the part you spoke about with winning the lottery, especially. Um, I mean, I don't gamble. I've, every once in a while, and I'm talking like every couple of years, I'll play like blackjack or poker with some friends, but I've never been to a casino. And one of the reasons is, of course, gambling is addictive, right? And I just don't want to put myself in a position in general to facilitate something that could ruin my life, right? Because it does ruin a lot of people's lives. But, it's not just to be a killjoy. The one of the biggest things is if you win the lottery, or let's say you win the jackpot in a casino, like in a slot machine or something like that. I'm very aware that in relation to your other accomplishments, that might be the greatest thing that ever happens to you. And it will have absolutely nothing to do with anything about you, right? You were just right place, right time. And for, there's different ways to frame it, but, the bigger the event, I guess the more difficult it is to reframe. Um, it's a lot easier to reframe someone cutting you off in traffic than a loved one dying. Um, but like when you win that money and your life changes in a significant way, that might be the greatest accomplishment you've ever had, and it has nothing to do with anything you've ever done. You didn't work for it, you didn't earn it. And to look at my other accomplishments in the shadow of something like that would just cast a shadow, on a lot of the things in your life. Because maybe I don't know what the Powerball gets up to, but like say you win $500 million after tax, and maybe you start a bakery or a podcast, or you release an album and it makes you $1 million. Do you think you would be more proud and more satisfied if you didn't win that 500 million first? Well, absolutely you would, because now you have it in relation to something else that was, sure, it's a fiscal view on the world, but it's hard not to view things fiscally, at least in some way. But like, that great project that most people would view as a huge success, $1 million out of whatever it may be, is now 1/500th of something that just happened to you. And I think it would just, completely throw off your gauge for so many other things in your life. Could you ever look at $50 the same way? Could you ever look at going out for dinner with friends, or, saving dollars? Could you ever think about saving money and saving up for something ever again the same way? No. And I think that, I'm under no delusion that if I happened to play the lottery, I think I would win. But I'm not even I don't want that life. You know what I mean? I want to earn my successes, and I want to be a miserable failure along the way. Well, I want to, but in a real sense, like I want the journey of struggling to find the success, not just the success in the end.
And just to add, I guess, an additional note is that we often see people who win the lottery or the just run child, to put it in simple terms, just absolutely fumble what they've got. A tremendous like, blessing dropped in their lap. And like you said, would you even think to consider saving money the way you used to? Do you detach yourself from the original value you have of money or experiences and lose sight of what you've got simply because of how quick it was, how much of a perspective shattering experience that was? That's why I feel like the long haul of the journey, so many people want this instant gratification, which I tie heavily into our social media use nowadays and a number of other things. But that journey is the thing that if we saw ourselves like and this is going to be a little goofy sounding, but like a sword. If you saw yourself as a sword and you were tempering that steel, every hardship, every obstacle, every learning experience, every immense failure, as you said earlier, leading to your eventual success, you gain insight. You gain insight on how the world works, how the industry or field you want to get into works, how you operate within that. And ultimately, so when you do have a tremendous success, like a Powerball win, or not saying that that's it, but comparable, you won't shatter under that immediate shattering of your perspective. You won't lose what you've worked so hard to get, because that's a constant reminder of how much you put in to get something out, and you wouldn't jeopardize what you've worked so hard to get, and you now have the insight and understanding to help you maintain that. So in a lot of ways, people want that overnight success, not knowing that the journey to get there is what gives you the experience to maintain it, or the insight to truly appreciate it and manage it properly. So it just, again, further feeds the belief that you want to I'm losing it a second here, but that you would want to value the journey. Not value the journey, but the hardship. You should desire a life that is not easy. You should desire hardships in life that will further temper your steel, sharpen your blade, increase to your skills, your wisdom, and understanding along the way. You should intertwine that with your beliefs in a way that'll help you approach these things.
Yeah, and speaking of maintaining that success, after you've gotten it and on the way to the success in pursuit of whatever goal it is. You mentioned earlier kind of the cultivation of your habits to point your unfocused mind in the same direction that your focused mind is pointed in. Obviously, when you're focused, it's easier to knock out the work. When you're unfocused, who knows what you're going to do? But being able to cultivate your habits to refocus you. I'm curious about what you have to say on not just cultivating your habits, but your environment, in the sense of, maybe leaving notes on your desk, not in things to do, but, you could work harder, something like that, or cultivating the relationships that you have, keeping the people around you that align with the goals that you're trying to accomplish, as well as the habits too.
So, sorry, I might have read too deep into the first part of the question, but it's the way that focus helps to maintain these very kinds of relationships, or could I?
So it's more how you can design the different aspects of your life. So your environment, your relationship, your habits, your like your physical habits, your mental habits, to point you in the direction you want to be pointed.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So I guess I do like how you started it, which is, I guess, what sidetracked me initially, is that focus is something that is going to be a quintessential part of being able to find out to what extent all of these different forms of relationship play a part in your life and the pursuit of your goals. Um, so, focus is probably one of the most indispensable tools alongside with belief we talked about earlier, but cultivating focus, all of these things are far more intertwined than we, I guess, would commonly believe. And I say that because focus is what keeps you diligent with your discipline. And focus is what reminds you to always check in with your pillars of belief. Focus is keeping these things either in the back or forefront of your mind at any given moment. And to lose touch with that focus is to momentarily sever yourself from that belief, or sever yourself from an aspect of yourself that you might want to bring. So it's a state of awareness that you want to be in that is almost ever present, ever presently focused on what it is you want to accomplish, whether that be quite literal accomplishments or even just bettering the relationships of the people around you, or making a concerted effort to recognize which relationships serve you, which pursuits serve your highest aspiring goals, which highest aspiring goals align with those beliefs we talked about earlier. It is a cascading, a domino effect of sorts, where I feel like these a state of focus and awareness is what makes so much of these things much more easy to attain. So I guess one thing that really made that beneficial was, or not made me realize that focus was beneficial, was simply seeing how without that focus you can watch aspects of yourself or that you want for yourself be cast to the wayside. And this does come through trial and error, like personally. And correct me if I did again read into this question wrong, but but I do it's all staying in line on the same page with yourself. And you find that, like we talked about earlier, there are so many distractory forces that play a game amongst our beliefs that can try to rob a position of one of our pillars. And I keep using the metaphor. I don't have to anymore, but but essentially, I mean, we're battling ingrained habits, both from childhood, from repetitive observation, from repetitive, I guess you could say, our ingrained patterns of survival, like things that we don't even think influence us on a greater scale. The way that we interact in relationships could very easily be a stemming off of the way we react in much more hostile environments or similar relationships. And in a way that all of these, it's something to be ever aware of, ever present in the idea that at any moment, things around you are trying to take the place of your beliefs. And if they aren't right now, for anyone watching that hasn't made those firm beliefs, it's the priority of your focus to realize how many of these beliefs are not actually your own. And so that ultimately can influence your life, your relationships, in the same way that you said that you might crave a Porsche for the aesthetic appeal or the factor of impressing somebody. You are willing something into your life that ultimately you don't really want, that maybe you've been convinced through years of conditioning, either from relatives or friends that you've seen make similar accomplishments, that has led you astray from your core beliefs. And I do believe like cultivating the kind of relationships that you want and want to keep, or maintaining the path that you want to see yourself continue to find the success and find the ultimate goals that you desire, again, do play a sorry, does have focus and awareness of the things you set for yourself play an integral part of achieving and maintaining all of those things. And I might have gotten a little bit, you know, meandering right there with the wording, but uh, just to reiterate, it is the what I have found in myself to be one of the most impactful tools for executing and maintaining the life that you truly find yourself wanting most, or holding dearest to your vision that you have for yourself and the world around you or the people around you, is staying true to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
As Disney as that might sound, it's much harder said than done. And sitting there and thinking honestly and diligently towards what can bring about not only an understanding of what those things are that you want, but the ways that you can truly go about getting those things, and doing it in a way, this depends on the person, that also aligns with your beliefs. Maybe you don't. You want to try your best not to hurt anyone in the process. You want to try to do the most for others in the process. You want to try to contribute as much as you can in the process. These things are all a lifelong project, something that you truly never let fall out of your sight. I do understand that the concept of using pillars of belief gives you the impression that they are everlasting, but in the same way that the pillars of any coliseum or mausoleum, when left unkempt after thousands of years, will fall apart, they'll decay when society is not surrounding it, when there are not the people supervising and maintaining it. So in that way, you need to be the personal maintenance to your own foundation. And that lifelong work of that maintenance, that focus and diligent work on always trying to bring about the best for yourself and others, and even the best beliefs for yourself, will ultimately make it so these things are ultimately more likely and more easily maintained. Because if your beliefs and your thoughts are not maintained, then you're likely to be sidetracked, you're likely to be distracted, you're likely to fall off your course, and likely to bring in people who might not be the best for you, or take on opportunities that might be promising but will pull you further from your goals and ambitions. Or, there's just an almost non-stop consumption of information and content, different beliefs, different systems of organization, a whole slew of things that can very easily pull us away from what we know to be true for ourselves. Maybe not true universally, but things that will bring about the outcome we desire. So, standing in opposition of all the things that we are constantly being bombarded with, either from family members, from friends, from the constant use of social media, just again a bombarding, a hypnosis effect of just scrolling and taking in more of other people's beliefs, understandings, and ideals. We need to stay true to who we are, or who you want yourself to be.
It's pretty common for people to say, time is your most valuable asset. It is. You can't get back your time. You can make more money, you can make more friends, you can't get back your time. And I think that's headed in the right direction, but I think that is still not the fundamental thing that you can't get back, or that's valuable. I think it's your focus. I think it's your attention. Because, say you're working on a project, you finish it in 3 hours instead of 5. You've saved yourself 2 hours. And then you hop on Instagram and it's 2 hours later. That time wasn't all that valuable. It was just gone. Because something else had your focus, something essentially meaningless had your focus. You know, if that time was spent focusing on your family or your pursuit or your friends or whatever it may be, that's what makes it valuable. And all these distracting factors in the modern day are little value grabs, you know. That's why viewing an ad is valuable. That's why advertisers pay for that, because your attention is what's valuable. And you put it perfectly earlier when you described all the meaning that's around us, all the different meanings, all the veins of belief that aren't our own, that are pervasive in our day-to-day lives. And meaning is what guides our attention, right? That's why you might want the Porsche. You might focus on having the Porsche. It's because you've been sold a meaning that this is what's important. It's important to look wealthy in front of your peers or in front of strangers. And on a daily basis, if you take the time to look, you will see how much meaning is sold to us on a daily basis. Have clearer skin. That's what's important. No, buy the nice car. That's what's important. No, spend 3 hours on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube. That's what's important. Or get the new iPhone. That's what's important. Because this is as old as time, but if you can get a bunch of people to believe the same thing, have the same meanings that they follow, that's the most powerful thing in the world, right? That's what guides armies and religions and activists. And, you know, in little micro grabs, an advertisement will try to use some of that to get you to buy their shampoo, right? But at the end of the day, when that's happening through billboards or just, you know, and it's not necessarily malicious, right? This happens when you interact with your friends, because no two people are going to have the exact same values. Is they're going to want certain things and dress a certain way and speak a certain way that isn't you, and it's going to bump you off track a little bit regardless. And that's why it's so important to spend some of that focus on finding what's meaningful to you, so that when you're sold all these meanings out in the world, when you're bombarded with what to buy and what to look like and what to aspire to be, it just, you know, it brushes off you, because you already know those things. You're not looking for them in external sources, because you've already found it for yourself. The other thing that I really wanted to touch on was the little things that we don't necessarily have in our full conscious that we're not aware of, things that we can't quite focus on, right? Things that our parents did, things that our friends have done, life experiences, traumas, and stuff like that guide our focus and our meaning too. And I'm really curious on your perspective on this, and I'm going to lay out a bit more explicitly. So there was a study with rats, right? And these rats were exposed to a scent, let's just say the smell of oranges. And after they were exposed to oranges, they were shocked every time. So it built up this Pavlovian behavior, right? So every time they smelled oranges, they would get a cortisol spike, a heart rate spike, because they thought they were going to get shocked, because they were going to get shocked. Now, when they had children, the children were never shocked. The children were never brought up with the parents, right? They were separated at birth, the baby rats. And yet, when they were exposed to orange, the smell of orange, they had the same, to a lesser extent, but they still had the same spike in cortisol. They had the same spike in heart rate. And when those rats had children, they hadn't even, and keep in mind, only the first generation was shocked. Now that grandchild generation, that third generation, had an even more potent reaction to the orange smell. So the parents had a significant reaction. They had a heart rate spike. They had a cortisol spike. The grandchildren had an even higher cortisol spike, an even higher heart rate increase. And it kind of puts into perspective all of the things that you really need to take time to think about within yourself, because all of the traumas and experiences of your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents and your great-great-great-grandparents, all of them impact you and drive you. And this is the field of epigenetics, which used to... We used to think that evolution just happened on the scale of millions of years, right? But this is counter to that. You do pass on certain traits to your children and your grandchildren. And it's just interesting to think about, because, you know, in the land of America, but all over the world, everyone has experienced traumas. You know, the world isn't an easy place. And what's also extremely interesting is they did the same test, but they rehabilitated the rats before this generation of children, right? So they exposed them to orange, shocked them, and then over time they exposed them to orange and didn't shock them, and they lost the spike. And then when they had children, the children didn't have it. So if you cure your traumas, if you cure your experiences, they don't get passed on.
So they did sort of a reverse conditioning technique. That's all right. That's cool.
Yeah. But I'm curious on your perspective on the almost invisible factors that shape who we are, and how much, and the importance and time we should put into trying to understand them and trying to work through them.
All right. I do love this question because it's essential. It should be, from the standpoint of establishments that are aware of these studies, and to the extent that we are affected by our passing generations on a much more micro scale versus the macro million-year evolutionary scale. It's almost as if I would say it's just to intertwine this with time again, that being able to step back, being able to recognize that these invisible lines do connect you to various forms of trauma, various forms of anxiety, stressors, both mental, physical, metabolic. The fact that we knowingly do this and don't often give one the opportunity to delve into this until later in life. You'll find that most of us, go into a healing process sometimes mid to late 20s, if you're lucky, if you have the finances, if you have the the resources necessary, if you live in the proper places to be able to unpack things of that nature. But the vast majority of us will not be exposed or experience from a top-down view exactly how much we are influenced, which more often than not leads to a shattered, not to say shattered again, but I guess a warped perspective of one's self-image, which then makes it much more difficult for you to develop in a positive sense that you are associating with yourself someone who is capable, someone who is not fragile, someone who is, depending on what your inherited stressors or traumas are. We just have no idea exactly what is and isn't ours to call our own. You know what I mean? That's why it is so crucial of an experience. And I do believe that perhaps the younger the better, but I understand there's plenty of things that a younger person couldn't quite wrap their head around yet. But to be offered the opportunity to unpack and at the very least understand the importance of introspection, and perhaps maybe not put an iPad or a phone in the hands of every 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 year old to fill up that void of space, that time that is otherwise, I guess, considered boredom. But looking back on my youth, I spent a pretty great deal of time alone, and I feel as though it was ultimately pretty good for me, in a strange sense. Not on a not I couldn't I wouldn't dare to put this on a worldwide scale, but I can say personally that gave me a window of time to be able to devote to thinking, well, what is this whole dialogue of thoughts going on in my head, and what is this telling me? What is this as a whole? And then being able to just follow a series of questions into, I guess, a young understanding of what was going on. Whereas I hear stories nowadays of people contacting psychologists because they heard a voice in their head, not knowing that there was their own thoughts. Just simply because the generations below us quite literally have less time by themselves, time that is uninterrupted by content absorption and consumerist, just what do we want to eat today? What am I going to do? You know what I'm saying? It's just a constant in streaming of outside influences. And so I find it really wild. I hadn't heard of this study that you brought up beforehand, but to see that to such an extent that not only are we influenced potentially 3 generations back, but the third generation received a more potent spike of of the cortisol levels, of the heightened heart rate. And then you think about, in our case, what was happening 3 generations ago, and you're like, oh, there's not a lot. There's not. I mean, for some people it was good, and for some people it was bad. And but the general state of the world was a bit more. There was a number of conflicts going on. At least in my grandparents' age, there was world wars, there was segregation, there were conflicts of every kind. Even in our mothers and fathers, they had Cold War, they had Vietnam, they had just on a war sense. And then to wonder what the implications of further worldwide trauma would be like. Like, we've never experienced, and not to diverge too far from the topic, but just we've never experienced a worldwide trauma or a countrywide trauma like 9/11. That was televised in such a way, and it was a series of just absolutely shocking horror. You know what I mean? It was like 1 plane, 2 plane, spread apart. You didn't expect the second one, and then after that shock, that series of shocks, then it's like, oh, they're falling now. You know what I mean? It's a succession of extreme stress, worry, and then in that sense, we're also taught, like, I guess, who to blame, so to speak, or just potential conditionings. I'm not saying anything definitive, but I'm just saying, like, in a lot of ways, we don't know why we react to certain scenarios, certain situations, certain people. We don't know to what extent these things have been, brought about through previous generations, and it's just wild to see consistently how wild to see studies with rats tend to correlate with humans the way they do.
No, absolutely. And just to clarify something about the study is, I think they did this beyond the third generation. That's just as far as I wanted to break down the study, but even more alarming, I guess you would say, is it's the reaction, the elevated heart rate, the cortisol, right? That's the obvious stuff. That's the stuff that you can see. What about all the other stuff? And it's not just that third generation, because if they have that reaction and they still don't resolve that trauma, even though it didn't happen to them, it will perpetually carry on. So whatever happened to, your great 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 grandfather, if someone along that lineage, if no one ever worked it out before they had kids, also, right? Because that's where it's passed on, then that trait is passed on. And if you think about how young people have had kids for so long, it's like
Yeah.
there's no way. There's no way.
No.
But yeah, it's definitely an eye-opening perspective, and it lends itself to really taking the time to think about yourself and the drivers that you're aware of and that you're not aware of.
Right. And I guess just an additional little layer to it, I guess, would just to be hopeful in the future that we reach a place where self-development, self-improvement, introspection in a way that can lead to uncovering some of these things, or potentially to what extent we are affected by them, becomes a serious priority for future generations. Just because I feel like it should go without saying that we are witnessing on a day-to-day basis the repercussions of people who have continually sought to build families, have children, and further perpetuate their ingrained habits, fears, unresolved traumas. And in a lot of cases, people, this is, I guess, more the minority, but using children as almost a band-aid in a sense. You know what I mean? But, or just a threshold of accomplishment in life, but think more almost in a sense of JFK, like, think not what you can do for yourself, but what you can do for your country or your world as a whole, or the future of mankind. To have that kind of longevity and foresight could drastically change the course of our future as a species, just because it would be a massive amount of work less that every passing generation would have to do before that they can confidently and capably approach what they want to do in life and what they want to bring to the world, and figuring out what person they want to be. Because as we said with the pillars of belief earlier, a great part of putting them together and, I guess, renovating them, adding additions to your beliefs, or eliminating old beliefs and adding new ones, there is a destruction of oneself or one's beliefs that has to come with certain additions. You know what I mean? So if you have some people will have a lot more that they have to get rid of their old self or their old beliefs to embody the person or the beliefs that they want to have in the future. And it just, for us to prioritize taking that initiative in our own lives to better ourselves and better our understanding of ourselves, will better our children's future. Not just in a day-to-day life, like, my mom keeps doing X, Y, and Z because she never went to therapy, but like in a literal, like, passed down genetically, not just through learned behavior, but biologically transferring a lot of our stresses, our fears, our anxieties. We're giving the next generation more obstacles than they already have, which we also know is a lot. So I guess that's the main takeaway for me with that really interesting study. They do some incredible, wild, and sometimes unethical studies with rats, but there's a lot to be learned, for sure.
Is that sometimes taking that time is, in and of itself, is difficult, and not just, it's hard to take that time when you work a full-time job or you have other obligations, but doing it can be difficult in and of itself. even when you have the resources to sustain yourself, um, or withdraw somewhat from your friends, your family, or your work to take that time. Because it's, I mean, it's difficult to really, look at your strengths and weaknesses. It's difficult to really look at yourself. And it can be, well, other people also don't want you to change, because people want what's comfortable in general. It takes effort to pursue something that's uncomfortable. And in general, people aren't going to want you to change. And if you're going through this change period around other people, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So what ends up happening is, you withdraw a little bit, which can also be difficult because, that's, loneliness and all of the parallel feelings that come along with that. So taking the time to withdraw, it isn't the easiest thing, but at the end of it, you're going to be better off, because if you do try to do these things around other people and you're constantly getting negative feedback, like, hey, you don't usually dress that way. Why are you dressing different? Or you don't usually talk about that stuff. Why are you asking about future goals? Or what do you mean you want to stop drinking? You don't want to go out with the boys anymore? Like, there's all kinds of, oh man, I don't want to use this word, but like microaggressions. It's all kind of, it's all micro negative reinforcement for the change that you're trying to make. So taking the time to step away, to solidify what you want before you re-enter the world, helps build that foundation, because you don't want to build it with all these cracks. You don't want to be trying to implement these new things while also capitulating to peer pressure, because then you're not really doing it. Your foundation is fundamentally not your foundation. It's made up of other things. And I know we both knew this conversation was going in this direction, but especially in light of the talk about inherited traumas and stuff like that, I want to know where you think the place for therapy, and specifically psychedelic therapy, has in making these changes, maybe healing from traumas or experiences, but also making these changes to develop your pillars.
I do find that therapy as a whole is something, in particular cognitive behavioral therapy, is something that, as people gain more and more access to, we will have noticeable changes in, I guess, the way that people develop, not only in the microcosmic, the individual, but the macro, the way that we relate with each other, the way that the family develops. But predominantly, as in the micro sense, in the case of the individual, I really love what you said earlier about how the brain really does crave comfort, because that is essentially what it's designed to do. It's just a matter of the brain growing comfortable with the wrong things. That tends to lead to a lot of inner turmoil and the inability to change one's state of mind, patterns of thinking, ingrained traumas. It's things that we continually reinforce because it's something that is almost scarier to imagine a world without those negative feelings, because it's what we've grown accustomed to. And even though it might be something that's detrimental to us, that harms us mentally or emotionally, it's something that our brain has continued to reinforce as something that, it's almost in the same sense of, it's better but I forget the exact phrase, but better to be the evil that you know. You know what I'm saying? There's the unknown evil and the evil that you know. And I probably just butchered that saying, but
Better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
thank you. And I do find that that is essentially what our brain operates upon, because it will, in people who are attempting to rehabilitate their frame of mind or their thoughts that have continually betrayed them, prevented them from success, from happiness, from peace of mind, they will know beyond a shadow of a doubt that doing certain things will change the general state of their mind, either backed by science or experientially witnessed in friends of theirs or whoever, or whatever the case. And still, the mind will convince you out of change, convince you that it's useless, convince you that it is only going to make things worse potentially. It's the fear of the unknown that the brain is hardwired to avoid. And especially if you have, um, those ingrained beliefs. But what therapy, and psychedelic therapy for that matter, poses is the benefits that come with, and I'm not talking about psychedelics in a Scooby Doo mystery mobile, or we're not
Recreational.
we're not gonna go, yeah, we're not gonna go down to the Amazon and do ayahuasca ceremonies. I mean, if that's your preference, go for it. But I'm talking as simple as um, medically supervised, uh, both psilocybin, magic mushrooms, ketamine therapy. In some cases, people do dabble with LSD, which um, is a more synthetic, man-made version that does replicate a lot of the same chemical bonds that you would find in other psychedelics. So it is a man-made psychedelic that's pretty potent. But one thing that all of these psychedelics share that give them the medical benefit that is now being supported by academic journals and some of the most prominent universities in the world, they're pioneering the use of psychedelics as a means to break through those ingrained patterns in your mind that want to choose safety, choose comfort, choose those negatively ingrained patterns about yourself. What they offer is benefits that you would describe as the very thing that makes it easier to overcome. And a lot of people use psychedelics for, from athletics to the acquisition of new languages to picking up new skills of all kinds. And they're using something that's present or able to be attained through psychedelics called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is essentially the reorganizing and connection of synapses within the brain. So the reorganizing is essentially, if you have an ingrained pattern about you, a way of thinking, a belief, a something as simple as motor functions. If I was to brush my teeth every day with the right hand and then switch to my left, that's typically uncomfortable for my brain to try and get comfortable with, simply because it is outside of my deeper ingrained neural pathways. Same way, if you're learning a new language, different languages will take on different sentence structures, different uses of the tongue, the way that they relate, just to get give a deeper understanding of the ways that it enhances, that neuroplasticity enhances your acuity of new skills, new talents. It's multifaceted, from tactile and like in a bodily sense, to thought, language, belief. It makes your brain more malleable. And a byproduct of psychedelics as well is something called neurogenesis, which is the creation of new neurons. Essentially, pardon me, the neurogenesis effect is what is helping your brain grow actively as you get older. Not in like expand, like you're not going to get the brainiac cranium or anything, but what it does do is quite literally encourage your brain to continue making new brain cells, new synaptic connections, being able to create a broader and more intricate connection between all the different, you know, electrical connections within the brain, synapses and neurons. And that's just the scientific side of it. But in layman's terms, what this all means is the way that you can acquire new skills, new languages, new, I guess, all sorts of skills through these benefits that come through psychedelics. They also affect the beliefs and the naturally, or I guess habitually ingrained thought patterns that we've given ourselves. They're hard to shake out for the exact same reason that it's hard to pick up a new skill after you're 30, 40 years old. But a kid can pick up a new language and learn it alongside another language while learning new sports, while learning new skills. They have an abundance of neuroplastic effects acting upon their brain and neurogenesis that's going on in their brain all throughout their developmental years. Well, until I think they said the starting of dropping off of neuroplastic effects will happen around, I want to say around 25 or 26 years old, if my memory is correct. But what you
Yikes.
can what you can do, that's it, we're right there.
That's close.
But
That's now.
but I'm glad you said that though, because there are plenty of things that we can do now that will be able to expand the window of time that we can derive the benefits from neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity does happen naturally, as I said, with kids and throughout developmental years, but there is the expand, like the longevity that we can give to the neuroplastic effects that we want, and the use of these things within moderation or with medical supervision that give us these continued benefits even in our much older, let's say our senior citizens, our parents, siblings, whatever the case, people who may be over the hill and didn't have the resources available to continue the neuroplastic effects that are naturally going on. This will allow them to be able to regain that ability to pick up skills quickly, to be able to redefine their pillars of belief, to be able to shake off the parts of their ingrained thinking patterns that would prefer comfort in negativity or self-deprecating beliefs, or um, beliefs that may discourage leaps of faith or contradicting certain people's opinions. You know, there's any number of different thought patterns that we have habituated and become made commonplace in our minds that ultimately play a huge hand in shaping our life. And so this connects so well with what we were talking about earlier, only because it won't be easy for everyone to decide what thoughts are worth keeping, what thoughts are worth adding, and being able to give your utmost focus and attention and belief. Like, belief is in itself a skill because you are choosing. There is a choice beyond, like we were talking about, fact, fiction, true, false. Sometimes you do want to decide to believe something that might contradict what you know to be true. And that is a skill that you will learn. Like, maybe, like we were talking about earlier, if you want to be the best employee in the company, but you might know that you're not right now. How do you convince yourself of that? How do you willfully become delusional and really embody that which you want for yourself? And I'm not saying, again, delusional in a derogatory sense, but I'm saying that what this does, what the opportunity and benefit of psychedelic therapy does pose, is the rapid and radical ability to change your ingrained beliefs, the negative ones toward yourself, the trauma that you want to unpack, the anxieties, the stressors, the sheer state of mind that you sit in on a day-to-day basis. This gives you the innate ability to be able to pick, choose, and embody that which you want to become through repetition. And what that does is give people opportunities to live a life that they wanted to live, that generations before us simply never had access to. So the ultimate the ultimate thing that substantiates this for me is sheerly what we have in place and have had in place for decades now, which is the most common forms of treating depression, anxiety, the things that plague our younger population, and I mean all walks of life nowadays. It's one of the most commonplace ailments that we see nowadays, alongside with like diet, obesity, and just it's become a part of our daily life. It's very hard to go any long period of time without hearing of someone who is suffering from depression or anxiety, or perhaps, you know, just simply self-deprecate. They don't think very highly of themselves, and that influences their ambitions and what they can accomplish in life. We see it along a full spectrum in any number of people. People who don't even identify with anxiety or depression still fall victim to the ingrained beliefs that hold themselves back. That someone who doesn't have these beliefs might consider it a limiting belief, something that may be the sole factor that keeps you just out of reach of your goals. And so it's really just an exciting time for me. It's one of my most favorite things to talk about, simply for the fact that it poses so much opportunity and so much benefit for the whole of humanity. And I mean, it's indispensable and an invaluable tool that can be used to truly help you choose the person you want to be and embody that on a level that, I mean, it's funny. I don't mean to bring him up. I don't mean to bring him up because I know he's a bit of a divisive person. I'm not much of I'm not really for or against. I find him interesting as a model of a human being. You know what I mean? But Andrew Tate comes up quite a bit these days. As I said, quite divisive. But that man exercises a logical mindset, and he has a vast array of things. We'll just leave it at that. Some people like him, some people don't. But what I will say is, when he does approach debates, arguments, questions, he can pick them apart logically in a way that I feel like a lot of us would respect, or get some kind of, may even try to emulate. I've seen that's become kind of a problem. There's too many people trying to become just like Andrew Tate, but he does a similar thing in that he will say he is the absolute greatest at what he does. He has convinced himself of a mindset that is probably not rooted entirely in fact, and I will say he is a bit more on the extreme end of what we would hope for most people to embody. But you can't deny that what he has convinced himself of has made him a far more potent individual as far as what he seeks to accomplish and the person that he would like to portray on the internet, which ultimately, it to be known for your persona online to such an extent like that, there has to be some sort of portrayal or acting or an act of sorts. But it does seem very convincing that he believes and embodies that which he thinks of himself, which you can quite plainly disagree with. um,
Just to go back a little bit to the psychedelic part, or really to the neuroplasticity part, I think that, well, I remember this was a while ago, but the brushing your teeth thing, I remember doing that for like a month, just brush my teeth with my left hand, just because I don't know where I read that or saw that, but I was just like, oh, it's going to help my brain, develop new neural pathways. Sounds good. Why not try it out?
And that is one of the tools that enhances the longevity of the neuroplastic effects, just maintaining that.
Continuing to try new things. Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. I mean, I'm someone who likes to do difficult things in general. I've, gone out of my way to learn a couple instruments in the past couple of years, which typically people don't do outside of middle school and high school. But your portrayal of those cemented beliefs, something that helps me think about it is I kind of imagine it as a road, and not like an asphalt road, but like a dirt road, a path. And the reactions, the instinctual reactions, and I use instinctual in the sense of just what you do, not in the literal sense of it's an instinct, but your initial reaction to things are kind of like the trodden path. They're things that at one point you didn't normally do. But in the same way as if you walk through the forest, the first time you walk through the forest, it's kind of hard, right? It's like learning to ride a bike. The first time you walk through the forest, it's kind of hard. The next time you walk through the forest, let's say you're walking, to the neighboring village. The second time you walk through, well, you've walked that path before. It's a little bit easier. You know the road. You broke some of the branches out of the way. You stepped on the grass. And then over time, and I'm sure anyone can find this in their local neighborhood if they live in a rural area or a suburban area, like where the grass is dead there or removed because people walk that way. Well, it wasn't always that way. And you can carve out a way in the forest just by regularly using it. And your trauma response or your reactive nature to certain things, whether it be the smell of an orange or when someone raises their voice to you or calls you by a certain name or whatever it may be, those things are like the trodden path. And I guess in this metaphor and the way that I think about it, using some of these neuroplasticity tools, which is, could be as simple as brushing your hand with brushing your teeth with the other hand, but could be as involved as psychedelic therapy is kind of regrowing the forest in a way, or at least giving your brain and your mind the chance to walk other paths instead of forcing it to walk down the same path again. And I've read studies about MDMA, which I don't think is technically a psychedelic. I don't know what the scientific reason for that is. I think it works on dopamine and oxytocin instead of like serotonin. But police using it to treat PTSD, which I know, what a demographic, right? After the drug war and everything, to be using drugs to treat it. But at the end of the day, an untraumatized police force is a better police force. But like using it to reduce their violent reactions to things, or their being a cop is a hard job, regardless of how you feel about police. Like that's a hard job, and all the things you see. I mean, you're going to see a lot of the lows of society, and being able to utilize therapy in conjunction with a drug, a medicine, however you want to frame it, to get such significant results in an area that's been kind of at a stalemate, or not even a stalemate, just kind of a dead end for a long time in treating trauma. Like, it's because I'm sure people who've been to therapy for a long time and haven't really made any progress because part of that is on the therapist, part of that is on the view of the therapy system and what it's supposed to accomplish. But the fact that you can go in and get the results of years of therapy in 1 to 3 sessions with mild doses of something that makes you feel good and love people, like MDMA, right? That's dopamine is the feel good, oxytocin is the bonding hormone, the bonding neurotransmitter or whatever. That you can do that and have such significant results is really, it's like you said, it's really exciting. It's really, it makes me hopeful about the future in the ways that this kind of stuff could be utilized to erase the traumas that have been handed down for generation and generation and generation, from smelling oranges and getting shocked.
Yeah. No, I like what you said a lot. It does pose just a tremendous amount of benefits, but the wide array of approaches that these benefits can take shape in, like as you said, from patterns of thought to patterns of belief to ingrained beliefs about past situations, which is in commonplace a lot of what makes trauma so potent for a lot of police officers or soldiers. And in the same way that we intertwine emotion and meaning to beliefs to give them the substance we need to get things done, they've done almost the inverse effect to these traumatic experiences, where they've attached emotional, um, they've attached like a very emotional connection, beliefs about how it could have gone, how it should have gone, what it has done to them, that gives that almost a, in the same way that those pillars of belief need that emotion and belief and understanding to uphold something you want. It's almost like the opposite counterpart of that, upholding something that is damaging you or hurting you or causing you pain. You know what I mean? It's the attachment of all these feelings to this single moment in time that you find yourself unescapably being brought back to day after day. And that's almost what you want from the positive beliefs, but we've twisted that in a way that we're experienced a certain level of traumatic experience that just has that same all encompassing, all focusing effect on us. And that's a terrible thing to experience. I don't wish that on anybody, but unfortunately that is the way that the world does unfold for a lot of people. But that one of the many benefits that has presented itself, as we were talking about, the thought patterns, the beliefs, the reflection on previous memories that it may hold trauma, something that we should all be cognizant of when recollecting things, when just hashing back old memories, things that hurt us in childhood, great memories, bad memories. Something that we should be aware of is that every time we recount a memory, depending on the emotion that you have attached to it, you are more or less likely to influence the events that you remember. So if you did have, say, a terrible experience in childhood, maybe it was bad, but not traumatic to the extent that you feel today. But every time that you brought that memory back up and you tried to extrapolate something from it or memorize, you know what I'm saying? Not memorize, but you delve back into that thought and you might remember it a little bit worse than it was each time because of the emotions that were intertwined with it. There's a maliciousness to it, an intention behind it, a crippling of yourself that you might continually add a bit more to and a bit more to and a bit more to and not even be cognizant of this. And that's something that I'm not minimizing anyone's traumas, anyone's pain, but I'm saying that this is a natural byproduct of continually bringing up these memories as we grow older. It's something that we don't have photographic memories, and we don't have, at least the vast majority of us. But we are prone to remember things ever so slightly differently as we grow older, and as our emotions become more and more intertwined with the remembrance of these things, they can warp in ways that just continue to hurt us more and more over time. And so what this benefit is in recollecting these things while under the supervision of a medical professional or someone who specializes in medicine healing or psychedelic therapy, is that you can look back on these things, and the same way that you've over time reframed it to be slightly more painful and slightly more painful and slightly more painful, you can look at these memories, with the same inverse effect. You can reframe the memory of these traumatic experiences as less and less than they are and bring it closer and closer to reality, or even, as we talked about earlier, take on a healthy delusion, which this will be on a case-to-case basis, and again under the supervision of a medical or psychological professional. But you can reframe and continue to see new perspective. And when I say reframe, I mean it can be something as simple as, if someone had hurt you, recognize that that person was only acting upon the hurt that they experienced, or and see how that really had nothing to do with you, but instead was the failings of another person who had failed them. You know what I mean? Causing the hurt, person that hurt you. As we've heard a million times, hurt people hurt people. You knew I was going there. But being able to give yourself distance from the extreme attachment of emotions towards pockets of time, memories, gives us the ability to reframe towards a more positively focused understanding of that experience. You can, even if it might not be enough to fully alleviate whatever has been brought upon you, it can reshape the way that you see it in a way that can give you peace of mind, can give you the ability to go forward in life, or the ability to not fixate it to the extent that you do. Because I mean, terrible things happen all the time. That's the unfortunate nature of the good and bad that exists around us at all times. It's the night and day, the dark, the light, the yin and yang. It's an inevitability that we experience hard times sooner or later. And it is, again, the framing, the shaping, the choice of belief that you want to carry yourself through life with that will help you be able to best handle these situations. And in some ways, if you have the opportunity and the ability to be able to revise the way that you handle these things or approach them in your mind, then you can alleviate so much, not only deeply ingrained previous pain that you've carried with you, but the way that you handle them going forward, and the way that you acclimate to the seasons of life, the ups and the downs, and overall make you more resilient, overall more happy, overall more, I guess, just taking that the decisions necessary to put you where you want to be. Yet again, reminding people that they have the control. They have much more control than they've ever known that they had available to them for the majority of their life. And being able to see what you're able to do with that control of yourself is, again, something that many generations have truly never experienced or known was something that could be experienced. So it's really, like we're talking about, like, some of these things really just kind of beautiful to me, because it's like, we're, even as far as we think we've come, we continue to find new frontiers that are yet to be explored, or like we have right now with psychedelic medicine, like, uncovered in the past really few years of peer-reviewed scientific research with the proper supervision and protocols that would give us the insights we have on how beneficial all this stuff is. This is very recent, so we don't even know the extent that this can go within the next 3, 5, 10 years, how much the boundary of the benefits could really go. But even for those of you, just as we can bring it back around early, but just for people who may not be as readily, might have these medicines or drugs readily available, or the supervision necessary to be able to try them in a safe environment. There are other ways that you can increase your neuroplasticity or maintain your level of neuroplasticity without the need of any legal or illicit, depending on where you live, drugs or plant medicines around you. Many of them things that some of you may already be doing or may have wanting to be doing, but there are things called BDNFs, brain-derived neurotropic factors, which are present both in food and are commonly produced by the human body as a result of certain activities, similar to how certain things that we do naturally can create more of a neuroplastic effect in the brain, or neurogenesis, which is the creation of new neurons in the brain. What you can do for the increase intake of BDNF, there are things like blueberries in particular have BDNF within it, or I guess aids in the production as well of BDNF. Cacao, green tea, we have probably heard for a long time the benefits that come associated with these things, but to this extent that we find out exactly what this is rather recent that we've uncovered that. And then the non-consumption based ways that we can get more BDNF in our bodies and brains is through consistent exercise And it doesn't have to be the spine breaking, muscle and tendon injuring, like extreme. It's really just the consistency, the exertion, and it's really just, I'm sure you probably heard of different zones of cardio engagement, hitting your different zones, making sure you have a wide array of exercise. Um, Things that, again, are different practices. Like maybe you'll do, it's like a hand in hand, the way you'd switch hands with a toothbrush. Maybe you'll do running one day, cycling another, yoga. Just be a uh, multifaceted with your fitness approach. And that isn't crucial, but that is a way to maximize it. I would say finding a healthy balance and ultimately finding the things that you like to do most will be the most beneficial. But if you are solely prioritizing absorbing and getting the most production of BDNF out of your body, I would vary those things. Find a multitude of things that you can, either periodically rotate out or just do whatever you feel that in a sense of switching things up. I mean, so, and interestingly enough, we talked a lot about focus. We talked a lot about awareness and attention. And one of the things that does naturally enhance BDNF is a meditation practice. So that cultivating that level of calm, that state of, I guess, just awareness. The meditation is different things for different people, but I suppose the most commonly agreed upon methods of meditation have been shown to produce some BDNF production within the body. So just, and then lastly, sleep. Sleep is always crucial, almost on a complete generalized scale as far as humans go. It's like sleep is like one of those things that is just the almost the end all be all as far as health benefits go, and mental efficiency, bodily recovery, the whole nine. But something that's again recently just been discovered is not that the quantity of sleep has the most impact on your mental efficiency, your recovery, but syncing up your, essentially making your circadian rhythm most efficient. And for those out there that don't know exactly what that means, is when you align your circadian rhythm with, let's say, morning and nighttime sunlight, which has been shown to increase for men testosterone, focus, just almost a full endocrinological reset as far as like being able to, it makes the body move more efficiently almost as a whole. I wouldn't say everything, but it is a generally hugely beneficial impact that you can do. And so I say all that to say that syncing up your sleep cycle and being able to sleep at the same hours, like a scheduled sleep period, like if you sleep from 10 to 7 or 10 to 5, you're going to sleep and waking up on a set schedule. They say that people who sleep in varied schedules more often will see more negative side effects on their health than someone who, let's say, routinely gets 4 or 5 hours or 6 hours of sleep compared to 7 or 8, which is something that I found kind of ridiculous, but has shown enough studies. I've seen enough studies recently to, I guess, be swayed in my belief. And since doing so, I try to embody that in my own life. Just saw a tangible difference in how my mind works, in the states of focus and awareness. And I feel like in a lot of ways, these things that you make a part of your practice are the things that will make all these other things we've talked about astronomically easier. Just being able to make yourself as efficient as possible for the benefit of yourself and your goals, your relationships, the things that you want to cultivate for yourself, whether that physical or belief based or thought pattern based, whatever the case. It's huge.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. I think I will probably pick up some blueberries tomorrow after I get to bed on time at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to be the lifestyle I'm living right now.
Very nice. I already got my blueberries.
Yeah, yeah. Well, next time I'm in Philly, we can bring blueberries to our frisbee golf
For sure,
hikes.
man.
Jake, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure. It's been very insightful. Um, if people want to find what you're working on, social media, any projects, where can they find you?
Currently, I am posting short videos, testing the waters on TikTok. You can find me at Balake, is Balakaee, and on YouTube you can find me at The Bridge Official, and just discussing and inquiring about a number of different topics. Really trying to, I guess, figure things out together and bring to the table what we may or may not agree on already. So just really just a place to try and discover new things together and get the most out of what we got right now. So thanks again for having me on, though, man. I had a good time.
Absolutely. Those links will be down in the description. And have a good day, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Stay tuned on Spotify and YouTube for new episodes of the podcast every Monday. And as always, keep an open mind.